Hello and welcome to the Healing Insight podcast, episode 46, with me, Sarah Hunt.
And me, Jez Hunt.
Hello, everybody. Here we are again. Hello, Jay. How are you doing this
Hello.
Friday?
I interrupted you. I'm very well, thank you. We got sunshine and quite unusual weather for the time of year. So, in a positive way. So, yes. So, all good with me.
Excellent. Well, today, I thought we maybe have a bit of a chat about being impulsive.
Ooh, being impulsive. Yes, because this could be an interesting chat.
It certainly could. Yeah, definitely.
It will be an interesting chat.
It will. And I've been very impulsive in the past. And it's got me into some sticky situations. And I look at my daughter and I see her be very impulsive at times, get herself into sticky situations. And I think, sometimes being impulsive can be a good thing, but sometimes being impulsive can get you in sticky situations. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I've been impulsive in the past too, and it's got me into some sticky situations as well. There's what comes up for me is it links back to the underlying theme we've talked about on many podcasts is that it's about being in your heart and connected with your intuition versus being in your head. So if you're being impulsive because it feels right, when I've done things that have felt right, they haven't necessarily ended up... okay, I was just trying to think of a specific example. They haven't necessarily ended up in a sticky situation. However, what just then popped up for me in that moment was, but every sticky situation I had was a lesson I needed to learn. So
That's a good point.
So being impulsive, whilst it might not have had the outcome I was expecting, hence sticky situation,
Yeah.
then there was always a lesson to learn from that. So maybe in some ways it was connected to my heart and my intuition that I had to do that because I needed to learn the lesson, not because I needed to get the outcome I was looking for.
That's a really good point. I hadn't thought of it like that, but that's a really good point in actual fact. Because really, everything that we experience is because we've got lessons that we want to learn, because that then helps us to grow as people and as spiritual beings having a human experience. So I think there's times, when you can be impulsive from your head, but there's also times when you can be impulsive from your heart because you just know that it's the right thing to do. So you're going to do it without thinking a lot about it. So it's quite, yeah, you really made me think about that, actually.
Well, and going back to what you said, heart and head, some people have, and people I know have left a job, moved countries because they felt it was the right thing to do. And 15, 20 years later, they're still happy. They're still where they moved to and they're happy and the life's completely different. That's impulsive because it was done impulsively. It wasn't like planned for a year. It was done. I'm going to go and I'm moving and that's it. And then they did whatever they needed to do to move. So it was done very quickly. Then that's from the heart. That was an impulsive thing that they did, but they felt it was the right thing to do. And then on the other side of it, I know people that have spent significant amounts of money on, I don't know, hi-fi systems or a car or something like that impulsively. And then, not sure I should have done that. sort of the
Mm.
buyer's remorse, that sort of after effect of actually, was that the right thing to do? When
Yeah.
that's not necessarily helpful, although there's possibly a lesson to learn there, that maybe you shouldn't listen to your impulses, or you should check in with your heart first before you make that impulse buy or that
Yeah.
impulse decision.
Yeah. It is making sure that you are in your heart, isn't it? That's important when you're making any kind of decision. But if it's something that's kind of impulsive, and sometimes we do have to do things what I call on the fly. You know, you've got to make a quick decision. It might be a bit impulsive, but we still need to try and feel our way through it. Does this feel right? You
But
know,
we can do that in a second.
yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree with you.
So does this feel, I think I should do this. Hang on. Does that feel right? Yes, it does. Oh, no, it doesn't. Why is that coming up then? It's that thing like we talked about before, being curious,
Yeah.
asking questions of ourselves, and questioning in a curiosity way, in a curious way,
Okay.
questioning ourselves and questioning the thoughts or the feelings that come up. So it's kind of a balance. So we've talked about trust before. It is about trusting ourselves, trusting that we have the knowledge and the information we need, trusting our feelings, trusting what our body's showing us. Possibly tempered slightly with being curious and just double checking, is this truly what I'm feeling from the heart, or is it that I'm feeling excitement over something because I'm in my head about it? Does
Yeah,
that make
absolutely.
sense?
And am I doing it for the right reasons? You know, am I being impulsive? And I know I've been impulsive in the past, as it's almost like, well, I'm going to do that because you've told me I can't, so I'm just going to go and do it instead of actually, should I be doing this? You know, sometimes we get ourselves into situations where we do things impulsively for for the wrong reasons, you know, and then someone will turn around to you and say, what on earth possessed you to do that? That's completely out of character for you. Um, and and you kind of take a step back, and as you say, buyer's remorse, there's some kind of remorse there, and you think, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that, but I need to learn from that situation. I need to recognize the lesson that's in that, and learn it so I don't do it again.
Isn't that linked with ego?
Yes, it probably is. Yeah, actually, yeah, that's a good point.
So when and I've done this myself, absolutely. You set your mind on something, so it's an impulsive thing, and then you might check yourself. Well, I have. I've. So it was a purchase, but made a decision. I wanted to buy something, and it's like, right, that's what I'm going to do. Impulse, and it was a short space of time to make that decision. Then I checked myself and said, whoa, hang on a minute, is that right? And then I justified it to myself and did it anyway.
That's ego kicking in, then,
Yeah,
isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah. Which is why that's what made me think of, actually, isn't that ego getting linked in there? Of, well, why listen to your feelings? You know you want it. Why not just have it? It's that
Yeah.
little voice sitting on your shoulder. Come on, you know you want it. It's okay. It'll be
Yeah.
all right. You know you want that extra cake. That's fine.
Yeah. Don't worry about the extra pounds it's going to put on your antiques. What's that saying? A moment on the lips, a lifetime on the hips. But yeah, joking aside, yeah, it's that difference, isn't it, between, and this is where heart and head, you know, when you're in your head, then you can find yourself being ego led rather than heart led, and that's why it's so important to make sure that you check in with your heart, check in with yourself. Does this feel right? Should I be doing this? And there's nothing wrong with being impulsive if it feels right. It's just that we still need to check in.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes doing impulsive things lead to fantastic outcomes and fantastic things. Opportunities that we wouldn't normally or previously have taken or done,
Yeah,
but things that enhance our life or enhance our experience of life, or something that's going to increase our awareness of a particular thing. or just give us a really wonderful experience.
Absolutely. And when you're tuned into your heart and your intuition, things will just pop into you. So it can kind of come across as if it's being very impulsive, but it's your intuition, it's your inner knowing telling you that that's the right thing to do, isn't it? And so if you're tuned into your intuition properly, then you may find that you do things that are more impulsive, but they will put you into flow, as we talked about in the last episode. Everything when we're in flow, everything just drops into place for us. Um, so we may find ourselves being more impulsive when we're in flow because we're being guided by our intuition and our hearts, and it's just popping into us. Oh, we need to do that. Oh, do I? Oh, yeah, I do need to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So then the secret to this, air quotes, the secret really is to be able to identify or differentiate between when we're being impulsive in our heads and when we're being impulsive from our hearts and our intuition.
Yeah.
So it is then, to me, the easiest way to do that is to take that step back and just do a quick question yourself. I want to do this. Oh, hang on a minute. Is this for my highest good? Does this feel right to me? Is this what I want to? Oh, yes, it is. Okay, do it. I mean, it might only delay things a few seconds. It doesn't necessarily have to take days.
Yeah.
But just taking that momentary step back can quite often clarify whether it's heart or head. And if it's head, again, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't do it. It's not like, if you really want a particular car, and you've got the money to buy it and you want to, or you want to buy it, doesn't mean that that's necessarily wrong to do that. But just, is it coming from the heart or is it coming from the head? If you're aware of that, then if the outcomes aren't as you expect them to be, or the lessons aren't what you expect them to be, that might be the indicator of why or when you're in your head versus when you're in your heart.
Mm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. It does make sense. And this then comes back to practicing tuning into yourself, because it's a skill.
Yes.
It's not something that you're going to get perfect every time. And I still don't get it always get it right, and that's okay. It's part of the journey. But learning to tune into yourself is a really important skill that all of us need to develop further as we step forward and move forward, because it will help us to know what's right for us, whether it's something that's impulsive or whether it's something we've stepped back and planned and decided, yeah, this is going to happen.
Mm.
But if we don't learn to tune into ourselves properly, then we are more likely to create circumstances where it may not be for our highest good, but there'll always be a lesson to learn.
Yeah.
It might just be a harder lesson than it needs to be.
Yeah. And if we don't learn to tune into ourselves and we don't learn to listen to ourselves, then we can't really blame anyone else anyway for things that happen. Because it's about, like we were saying at the end of Christmas, the last episode last year, it's about taking responsibility and being responsible for ourselves.
Yeah.
So if I choose, because it's a choice, if I choose not to tune into my intuition and not to listen to myself, or not to learn to listen to myself, then I'm choosing to ignore that. Well, that's fine. But then the consequences that come because of that, because of, therefore, the way I think, the actions I take, which then lead to the experiences I have, that's because I've made that choice of not tuning into myself. So the experiences I have will be different to the ones that I would have if I was in flow. They might not be for my highest good, but they might be pointing me in the direction of just listen to yourself. Just listen to yourself. Come on. I'm just trying to wake you up. Listen to yourself. Go into your intuition. Because the universe has this habit of pointing us in the right direction. It's just whether we listen to it or not, or we take notice of it or not.
Absolutely. And if we don't take notice, then usually the universe brings it to our attention in a bigger way.
Yeah.
We end up having harder lessons to learn that we may not have needed to experience had we listened to ourselves. And I know I've experienced that a few times when I was younger, where I've not listened to myself and carried on regardless. And then the universe has brought something up to me in a very big way. And it's like, whoa, why did that happen? That's his fault, her fault, everybody else's fault. And then, it's now when I've learned how to connect with myself more. And I look back and I think, oh, Sarah, oh, Sarah, you brought that on yourself.
But isn't it
I
interesting,
didn't listen.
particularly when you get something big happen, that initially when it happens, we go into. I've talked from my experience. I have gone into a so why did that happen? And yet when you actually look back, the warning signs were there.
We're there. Yeah,
The other
absolutely.
incidences that happened prior to that were there. I just didn't see them.
Or didn't want to see
Or,
them,
or
weren't ready to see
yeah,
them.
yeah.
Any of those things, really, isn't it? And I think back to a few things that happened to me. Definitely the warning signs were there. Definitely they were. And I chose not to listen. I chose, or I wasn't ready to listen, or maybe my soul just wanted me to learn in a big way
Yeah, yeah.
so that the lesson was learned once and for all.
So is that anti-impulsive then?
Could be, couldn't it? Um, but yeah, it's in. I just find it fascinating when I look back, um, and I look at some of the situations where I have been impulsive, and it's been impulsive from ego and head rather than from heart, and then I've got myself in pickles. That, but I've learned a lot from them. So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting when you start to kind of think about it. It's just like, and I think, listeners, it might be worth kind of just looking back. Where were you impulsive? How did that affect things for you? What might have been different if you'd listened to yourself? What did you learn from it? And that's probably one of the key things. What did you learn from that situation?
That's the it's probably the most important part of any of this is what's the lesson?
Mm.
Whatever it is that happens to you or that happens in your life, whether it happens to you or you allow it to happen, or let's not get into semantics possibly right now. But when something happens or an event happens, or then what is the lesson? What is it I'm meant to learn from this? So this has happened. What's it about?
Yeah.
Because the sooner we get an answer to that question, the sooner we can let go of it and move on. If we have something that happens and we don't learn the lesson, then chances are a similar thing will happen again and keep happening and being amplified each time
Yeah.
until we learn the lesson. So the sooner we learn a lesson, the quicker the quicker we can move forwards. So then it links back again to being curious.
Yes.
Being curious about why things. Oh, well, that's interesting. What's that happened? What's that happened? Or what's going on there? What's the lesson there? Those sorts of questions, and just asking them to yourself, writing them down in a journal, journaling on them, or whatever it might be, whatever works for you. But just learn to be curious about your actions and why things happen to you, why something's happened to you, why you're thinking what you're doing, why you react how you do, anything like that. Just be curious.
Mm.
Because there is always something to learn from it, I believe.
Yes, I agree with you. I think any situation that we perceive to be negative, actually, if we look at the lesson that's coming out of it, we can shift it around into something very positive because there is always, always, always something to learn from any given situation that we're presented with.
Yeah.
And there's always an opportunity to learn, and it's up to us to choose to learn from it.
So then could that mean it's about developing a willingness to learn then? And is that why people possibly struggle, is they have things happen to them or they perceive things to happen to them in their life. They don't want to carry on as they are. They want things to change, but they're not actually willing to step up and
Yes.
make
And make
that
those
change
changes.
and make the changes they need to make, because it's not about someone else making the changes necessarily. They might
Yes,
need
I
to as
agree
well
with
in
you.
their own journey, but not
Yeah.
from your
And
perspective.
that's probably why the universe amplifies things, because it's actually, you need to learn this lesson. You need to learn it. And then resisting, you've got to put changes in. And then it's like, boom, now you've got no choice. You've got to deal with it. And, I've seen that happen with a client recently. And we talked about her leaving her job. Well, she talked about her leaving her job 2 years ago, maybe three. Um, and she talked to me about the situation and what have you. And she said, I know I need to leave this job. And she was worried about leaving it for various different reasons.
Yeah.
And then recently she's come to see me again, and she said, I've got no choice but to leave the job because this, and this has happened, and I can't even face going back to work. She said, it's awful. In fact, I feel like I've left already. And I said to her, the universe has created this situation. And interestingly, things that were worrying her before about just leaving the job, things have been put into place that will take those worries away as she leaves the job. But the universe kind of said, you've not listened. We made it clear to you 2-3 years ago that this job was not for your highest good. You've not listened. Okay, now you've got no choice.
So then
Maybe it's happened in the way it has because the timing's right. It's, everything can drop into place, but it's happened in a big way. And that, I've had things like that happen for me
so
where I've kind of resisted change, and then I've had no choice. I've been, it's almost like being pinned against the wall in the corner. You've got to deal with it.
so then where I'm going is being impulsive our naturally our inflow state then?
Oh, that's a good point.
Because if I'm on purpose and I'm in flow and my intuition's firing off saying you need to do this, you need to do that, or do this, do that, do this, do that, and I'm following my intuition, following my heart, it feels right, then potentially I'm being in. So that client where 2 years ago I need to leave my job, then had she been impulsive, bearing in mind the topic of this podcast,
Yeah,
had
yeah,
she been impulsive or perceived to be impulsive, she could have just left it then.
yeah,
Where she I say resisted, I don't know the circumstances, but she didn't leave, so possibly resisted that impulsive thought of I need to leave this job, pushed
yeah,
back against it, or I can't do that because X, Y, and Z, whatever. So then what that's led to is, after 2 years of whatever, of getting to a point where she now has to leave the job. But had she followed her intuition 2 years previously, then she might already be at where she is now, but in a different way, in a different place. But then
yeah.
again, maybe she had to go this route to learn the lessons that she's learnt to be in the place that she is now.
Absolutely. And,
See
and
it?
we don't kind of know the answer to that, do we?
Well, no,
But,
no. And
if I look at my own experience, there's been times when I've taken the long route, I've taken the hard way through things. And maybe that's just because of the way I needed to learn those lessons. it's always difficult to know for sure, isn't it? But
So then it kind of goes back to what I said right at the beginning of this episode, really, that maybe being impulsive doesn't really matter. It's kind of, so whatever we do, we are going to learn something from it.
yeah,
Being impulsive might just give us a shortcut
yeah,
to get where we're meant to get without necessarily going through some of the hard lessons that we end up learning if we aren't in flow.
yes.
But then maybe those lessons are necessary. And
Depends on
maybe,
your path, doesn't it? It depends on what you've wanted to experience being here. That's going to have an influence on it.
and consciously, I guess most people would say, well, I want to experience nice things and happy things. I don't want all this crap that life throws at me and that I seem to go through, and all these lessons that I seem to be having to learn. And yet, it's through the adversity, through the troubles, the problems, the failures, in air quotes, the things that happen that we perceive to be negative, that give us the biggest lessons and the biggest strengths to develop and move forwards on our journey anyway.
Absolutely. Gives us the greatest growth. If everything was easy, if we didn't get things wrong, what would we learn?
Deathly silence. Big hush. Profound moment. Yeah, exactly. I mean, what would
We
then be the
learn,
point?
but yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. Um, I want to see things where um, there aren't big disasters, there aren't really awful things happening to people, but there are certain experiences that we need to have that help us to grow, that help us to come to a greater understanding of ourselves, of who we truly are, that help us to learn to be our best selves, to be self-serving, and then to recognize the importance of supporting others. And when we're in flow, we still learn lessons. So it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that, everything's just served up to us on a plate and it's all hunky-dory. But when we're in flow, the universe presents us with all the opportunities and possibilities that will help us to grow, but in an easier way than when we're resisting and pushing back against things.
So then being impulsive is okay. It's just a case of check in with yourself, be curious, and just double check. Does this feel right to me in this moment to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Doesn't feel like I've got much else to say about that, really.
No, I think I'm done as well. It's kind of that thought provoking.
Very thought provoking. Yeah, very thought provoking. Super.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to all you listeners. Hopefully, we've given you something to think about.
Be curious
Oh,
about being impulsive.
definitely. So, on that note, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.